The heavy oak doors of the private lounge closed, muting the heavy bass of the exclusive club below. Julian Vance, CEO of Vance Global, swirled the amber liquid in his crystal glass, staring out at the city skyline he practically owned. He was a man who calculated every risk, a man who believed everything and everyone had a price. Sitting across from him was Victor Ryland, his ambitious business partner, a man with a smile that never quite reached his eyes. Victor leaned forward, tapping his expensive watch. He proposed a wager, a twisted game of power. Victor bet Julian $10 million and a controlling seat on the board that Julian could not take a woman from the absolute bottom of society, marry her, and pass her off as a high society bride at the upcoming Vance Global Gala. Julian, fueled by sheer arrogance and the thrill of a challenge, accepted. He was certain he could mold anyone into a flawless accessory. The very next evening, the rain was pouring in sheets across the neon-lit streets. Julian's limousine was forced to stop near a rundown diner on the edge of the financial district. Stepping out to get some air, he noticed a woman arguing with a cruel manager who was tossing her meager belongings out the back door. Her name was Clara. She was soaked, shivering, yet her posture remained unbroken. She did not beg. She simply picked up her canvas bag, her chin held high. Julian approached her, offering a thick stack of cash to simply get in his car. Clara looked at the money, then at his custom-tailored suit, and let out a dry, humorless laugh. She told him that his money could buy a lot of things, but it could not buy her dignity, and she walked away into the rain. Julian was stunned. For the first time in his life, his wealth meant nothing. Intrigued and realizing she was the perfect candidate for his wager, he followed her, eventually proposing a cold, strictly business contract. He would pay off the crushing medical debt she mentioned in passing, and she would act as his wife for 6 months. With no other way to survive, Clara agreed, but only on the condition that she kept her independence. As she signed the papers, a heavy, antique silver locket slipped from beneath her worn sweater. Julian barely noticed it, but she quickly tucked it away, a shadow passing over her eyes. Their wedding at the City Hall was a swift, sterile affair. No flowers, no music, just the scratch of a pen on legal documents. When Clara moved into Julian's sprawling, minimalist penthouse, the clash of their worlds was immediate. The morning after she arrived, Julian left a limitless black credit card on the kitchen counter for her to buy a suitable wardrobe. When he returned that evening, the card was exactly where he had left it. Clara was wearing a simple, inexpensive dress she had bought herself. She told him his home felt like a museum, cold and empty, and she refused to be another piece of art he had purchased. Victor Ryland visited often, observing Clara with mocking, suspicious eyes, waiting for her to slip up and prove Julian had failed the bet. As the weeks passed, the icy walls between them began to thaw through quiet, unexpected moments. The turning point came late one night when Julian returned completely exhausted, coughing and burning with a sudden, fierce fever. The man who controlled thousands of employees was suddenly vulnerable, unable to even stand straight. Instead of calling the staff, Clara stayed awake the entire night. She placed cool, damp towels on his forehead and brewed a bitter, soothing tea her mother used to make. When Julian woke up, the blinding headache was gone, and he found Clara asleep in the armchair beside his bed. He realized then that he was looking at someone who cared for him without wanting a single dime in return. Slowly, the contract began to feel like a cage neither of them wanted to be in. They started talking, truly talking, sharing late-night dinners in the kitchen instead of the formal dining room. But secrets have a way of surfacing. One afternoon, while looking for a document in Clara's room, Julian accidentally knocked over her bag. The heavy silver locket spilled out, springing open to reveal a faded photograph and an engraved crest. The Beaumont family crest. Julian felt the breath leave his lungs. He knew that crest. 10 years ago, the Beaumont Empire had collapsed in a devastating fire, a tragedy that supposedly claimed the lives of the entire family, including their young heiress. Clara was not a nobody from the streets. She was Clara Beaumont. When Julian confronted her, the air in the penthouse turned thick with tension. Tears of anger and deep sorrow filled her eyes. She confessed the agonizing truth. The fire had not been an accident. and the financial ruin that destroyed her family was orchestrated by rival corporations, including early investors in Vance Global. She had hidden her identity to survive, to escape the people who wanted her erased. Julian was paralyzed by the weight of the revelation. The guilt of his world's connection to her pain made him pull away. He retreated into silence, locking himself in his office, unable to face the woman he was beginning to love. Clara felt the distance and assumed he was disgusted by her broken past. But Julian was not ignoring her. He was quietly dismantling his own schedule. He cancelled a multi-million-dollar overseas negotiation just to be home when she returned from her walks. He began leaving small silent apologies around the penthouse, a cup of her favorite bitter tea on the counter, a rare book she had mentioned in passing left on her pillow. No grand jewels, just genuine attention. Just as the ice between them began to melt again, Victor Ryland made his final move. Discovering the truth about the bet, Victor cornered Clara in the penthouse lobby the day before the grand gala. With a cruel sneer, he handed her a copy of the wager contract. He told her she was nothing but a $10 million joke to Julian, a pawn to secure a board seat. Clara's world shattered. All the tender moments, the quiet mornings, felt like a meticulously crafted lie. The night of the Vance Global Gala arrived, glittering with diamonds and flashing cameras. Julian stood at the top of the grand staircase, his heart pounding, fearing Clara would not show up. But she did. She walked in wearing a breathtaking crimson gown, holding her head high with the regal grace of a true survivor. As they stepped to the center of the ballroom, Victor Ryland took the microphone, aiming to destroy Julian completely. Victor announced to the elite crowd that Julian's new bride was a street beggar, a fraud bought for a bet. Whispers erupted through the room. But Julian did not flinch. He took the microphone from Victor's hand, his voice echoing with absolute authority. Julian declared that Victor was right about the bet, an arrogant mistake he would regret for the rest of his life. But he was wrong about the woman. Before Victor could gloat, Julian signaled his assistant. Screens across the ballroom illuminated, displaying not Clara's humble background, but a massive, undeniable dossier of Victor's recent offshore embezzlements and corporate fraud. The crowd gasped. As security moved in to escort a furious, humiliated Victor out of the building, Julian turned to the guests. He introduced his wife not as a charity case, but as Clara Beaumont, the rightful surviving heir to the Beaumont legacy, announcing that Vance Global was returning all the contested assets back to her name. The room erupted in shocked, respectful applause. Later that night, on the quiet balcony of their penthouse, the city lights shimmering below, Julian stood before Clara without his usual armor of pride. He looked into her eyes and offered a sincere, trembling apology. He told her the bet was the most foolish thing he had ever done, but it led him to the only real thing in his life. He asked for her forgiveness, not as a CEO, but as a man who loved her completely. Clara looked at the man who had traded his empire's dark past to give her back her name. She reached out, her hand resting gently against his cheek, and pulled him into a kiss that erased the pain of the past. As the months turned into years, the cold penthouse transformed into a warm, vibrant home. Together, they rebuilt the Beaumont Company from the ground up, merging their strengths to create an empire built on integrity rather than ruthless ambition. They left the shallow games of high society behind, finding their true wealth in the quiet, unshakable bond they had fought so hard to protect. If this story touched your heart, share it with someone who needs to hear a good story of love and redemption. Subscribe to the channel to follow the next stories. We will see you next time. The heavy mahogany doors of the boardroom slammed shut, but the echoing demands of the international investors still rang in Nathaniel Sterling's ears. As the ruthless force behind Sterling Capital, Nathaniel was accustomed to getting exactly what he wanted. But this time, the conservative European board members holding the keys to his most ambitious merger had stipulated a non-negotiable condition. They wanted stability. They wanted a family man, not a notorious playboy steering their combined future. Nathaniel had exactly 1 week to present a respectable wife, or the billion-dollar deal would evaporate. He poured a glass of scotch, his mind calculating the fastest, most effective acquisition he could make. He did not need romance. He needed a strategic alliance. That evening, at a suffocatingly elite charity auction, Nathaniel spotted the perfect solution. Sienna Hayes was standing alone by a marble pillar, her posture defiant despite the whispers trailing her every move. Until a month ago, she had been engaged to Marcus Devereux, Nathaniel's most bitter corporate rival. Marcus had publicly and viciously broken the engagement the moment Sienna's family lost their remaining wealth, casting her out of high society. She was a woman with nothing left to lose, holding a deep grudge against the man Nathaniel wanted to destroy. Nathaniel approached her, offering a cold, calculated proposition. He would clear her family's remaining debts and give her absolute financial independence. In exchange, she would wear his ring, smile for the cameras, and serve as the ultimate insult to Marcus Devereux. Sienna studied him, her eyes flashing with a fierce, unbroken pride. She agreed, but made it crystal clear that he was buying her time, not her obedience. Their wedding was a masterclass in public relations, held in the sprawling gardens of the Sterling estate, with 100 flashing cameras and absolutely zero warmth. When they retreated to his cavernous mansion, Nathaniel presented her with a velvet box containing a diamond necklace meant for their first press tour. Sienna did not even reach for it. She told him that she would play the part of the adoring wife in public, but she refused to be weighed down by his expensive chains in private. She turned her back on the glittering jewels, leaving Nathaniel staring after her, unexpectedly captivated by a woman who could not be bought with shiny things. Marcus Devereux watched their highly publicized union from afar, his ego bruised, convinced that Sienna was playing a desperate game he could easily ruin. Living under the same roof brought an intense, undeniable friction. They clashed over everything, their conversations a sharp dance of pride and guarded emotions. Yet the proximity also brought quiet, unguarded moments. During a particularly aggressive press event, the flashing lights and shouting paparazzi became overwhelming. Nathaniel noticed Sienna's hands trembling slightly. Without a word, he stepped in front of her, shielding her entirely from the cameras with his own body. He wrapped his warm coat around her shoulders and guided her to the car, his hand resting reassuringly on the small of her back. It was a silent gesture of protection that went far beyond their contract. Despite her iron walls, Sienna felt a spark of genuine warmth for the man she had sworn to keep at a distance. But the fragile peace was shattered on a rainy Tuesday evening. While organizing a shelf in the library, Sienna found an old sealed acquisition file. It detailed the aggressive, hostile takeover of a small maritime logistics company 10 years ago, her father's company. It was the exact move that had triggered her family's slow, agonizing ruin. When Nathaniel returned, the temperature in the room was freezing. Sienna stood by the window, the file tight in her hands. With tears of pure frustration and old grief, she confronted him directly. She told him that she had spent years hating a faceless corporation, only to marry the man who had destroyed her father's legacy for sport. She laid bare the devastation his ruthless ambition had caused her family. Nathaniel stood frozen, the ghosts of his past business deals suddenly taking on the painful reality of the woman standing before him. The revelation drove a massive wedge between them. Out of profound guilt, Nathaniel withdrew, his usual arrogance replaced by a haunting silence. But instead of showering her with meaningless gifts, he tried to speak through quiet actions. He secretly ordered the kitchen staff to prepare the comfort foods she missed from her childhood. He left the rare first-edition books she loved on her reading chair without any notes. He even cancelled a crucial meeting with the European investors just to sit quietly on the opposite side of the library while she read, simply offering his silent, respectful presence. Sensing the crack in their armor, Marcus Devereux saw his chance to strike. He cornered Sienna at a prestigious art gala, his voice dripping with venom. Marcus threatened to take the podium and expose their marriage as a fraudulent business transaction, promising to publicly drag her family's ruined name through the mud once again if she did not leave Nathaniel and walk out of the event in shame. He wanted to humiliate Nathaniel and break Sienna completely. But Sienna was no longer the broken woman Marcus had discarded. As Marcus moved toward the microphone to ruin them, Sienna stepped gracefully into the center of the room, intercepting him. With the entire elite crowd watching, she spoke clearly and fearlessly. She exposed Marcus's cowardly blackmail attempt right then and there, detailing how he had abandoned her when she was down, and how he was now desperately trying to sabotage a man who was twice the leader he would ever be. She looked at Nathaniel, her voice softening but carrying across the silent room, stating that while their beginning was unconventional, the respect and loyalty they shared was something Marcus could never comprehend. Marcus flushed crimson, stammering as the room erupted in mocking whispers. The investors he had tried to sway turned their backs on him in disgust, humiliated by his petty, unhinged display. Later that night, the mansion was quiet. Nathaniel found Sienna on the terrace, looking out over the sleeping city. He approached her, stripping away every ounce of his corporate armor. He told her that his wealth meant nothing if it had been built on the ashes of her family's happiness. He apologized sincerely, not just for the past, but for ever treating her as a transaction. He confessed that the fake marriage had become the only real thing he cared about, and he wanted to spend the rest of his life making things right. Sienna looked into his eyes, seeing the genuine remorse and the deep, abiding love he was finally brave enough to show. She closed the distance between them, forgiving the past, as she pulled him into a passionate, healing kiss. Months later, the frantic world of high-stakes corporate warfare felt like a distant memory. Nathaniel stepped down as CEO of Sterling Capital, leaving the empire in capable hands. He and Sienna chose to leave the toxic high society behind entirely. They moved to a quiet coastal town, investing their time and resources into rebuilding a small, honest maritime business in honor of her father. They found their true happiness not in skyscrapers or billions, but in the salty ocean breeze and the absolute certainty of their love. If this story brought a smile to your face, please share it with a friend who loves a journey of healing and true love. Subscribe to the channel so you never miss our upcoming romances. I will see you in the next story. The grand reading room of the Kane family estate was suffocatingly silent as the lawyer finished reading the final will and testament of the late patriarch. Sebastian Kane, the brilliant but notoriously solitary heir to Kane Enterprises, stared at the document in disbelief. To assume full control of the company and prevent its immediate liquidation, a move that would leave thousands of loyal employees jobless, he had exactly 30 days to marry. His mother, Eleanor Kane, a woman whose heart was as cold as her diamond earrings, smiled thinly from across the mahogany table. She was next in line for control, eager to sell the company for parts to satisfy her boundless greed. Sebastian knew he had to act quickly, and the marriage had to be a watertight legal arrangement with someone who wanted nothing to do with his chaotic world. That very afternoon, Sebastian was obligated to attend a hospital charity gala. He stepped away from the clinking champagne glasses to take a phone call in a quiet, dimly lit corridor of the children's ward. There he accidentally knocked over a cart of supplies. The woman who rushed to gather the scattered items was Lila Monroe, a dedicated pediatric nurse whose exhaustion was visible beneath her bright, defiant eyes. Sebastian immediately pulled out his checkbook, offering to replace the supplies with a generous donation to make up for his clumsiness. Lila stood up, gently pushing his hand away. She told him that throwing money at a problem did not magically fix the broken pieces, and she quietly finished picking up the medical supplies herself. Sebastian was instantly captivated. Surrounded by people who bowed to his wealth, he had finally found a woman who was completely unimpressed by it. He followed her to the nurse's station, proposing an absurd, strictly confidential business arrangement. He would build the new pediatric wing her hospital desperately needed, and in exchange, she would sign a 1-year marriage contract to secure his inheritance. Lila hesitated, her eyes darting away as she mentioned that her life was complicated and she had a heavy responsibility she could not abandon. But thinking of the sick children who needed the facility, she finally agreed, demanding that her personal life remain completely her own. Their wedding was a quiet, joyless transaction in a judge's chambers. Eleanor Kane attended only to glare at Lila, her eyes raking over Lila's simple off-the-rack dress with unhidden disgust. Moving into Sebastian's massive modern penthouse, Lila made it clear she would not be an obedient prop. When Eleanor invited herself over for dinner and attempted to humiliate Lila by criticizing her humble background and lack of breeding, Lila did not shrink away. She set her silver fork down and looked directly into Eleanor's eyes, stating calmly that a title and a trust fund did not buy basic human decency, something Eleanor clearly lacked. Sebastian watched in stunned silence, a spark of genuine admiration igniting in his chest. He had spent his entire life avoiding his mother's venom, but this gentle nurse had just neutralized it effortlessly. Despite their ironclad rules, the forced proximity began to chip away at their defenses. Sebastian started coming home early from the office, drawn to the unexpected warmth Lila brought to his sterile penthouse. One evening, Lila came home completely drained after a grueling 12-hour shift, her hands aching. Sebastian found her asleep on the sofa, her uniform still on. Without waking her, he gently placed a warm, heavy blanket over her shoulders, carefully slipped off her worn shoes, and sat in the chair opposite her, simply watching her rest. It was a silent, tender gesture that broke all the rules of their contract. When Lila woke up and saw him there, keeping watch over her exhausted form, the terrifying realization set in. She was falling in love with a man she was legally obligated to leave in a year, but Lila's closely guarded secret was about to shatter their fragile peace. Eleanor Kane, refusing to let an ordinary nurse stand in the way of her controlling the company, hired an elite private investigator. Late one night, Eleanor marched into Sebastian's office and slammed a thick envelope of photographs onto his desk. The pictures showed Lila at a modest apartment in the suburbs, holding a laughing 4-year-old boy. Eleanor sneered, calling Lila a deceitful gold digger who had hidden an illegitimate child to trap a billionaire. When Sebastian returned to the penthouse and confronted Lila with the photographs, the pain in her eyes was agonizing. Her voice trembled as she revealed the truth. The boy was her nephew, the son of her late sister. She had been hiding him from his abusive paternal family, who had the wealth and power to take him away from her forever. She had kept him a secret from Sebastian because she was terrified that his high-profile life would put a target on the little boy's back. Feeling betrayed that she did not trust him to protect her, Sebastian withdrew into a freezing professional silence. The penthouse felt larger and emptier than ever. But Sebastian did not seek revenge. Instead of grand apologies or expensive gifts, he quietly deployed his massive legal team. Behind the scenes, he ruthlessly dismantled the paternal family's claims, securing an airtight legal guardianship for Lila that no judge could ever overturn. He fought her biggest battle entirely in the shadows, asking for nothing in return. Unaware of Sebastian's intervention, Eleanor prepared her final, devastating strike. She organized a massive corporate banquet, inviting the board of directors, elite shareholders, and the press. Her plan was to publicly expose Lila's secret child, declare the marriage fraudulent, and have Sebastian deemed mentally unfit to run Kane Enterprises due to the scandal. As the speeches began, Eleanor approached the stage, a cruel smile stretching across her face. But before Eleanor could utter a single word into the microphone, the heavy ballroom doors opened. Sebastian walked in, tall and commanding, but he was not alone. By his side was Lila, wearing a stunning midnight blue gown, and resting safely in Sebastian's arms was the 4-year-old boy. The room fell completely silent. Sebastian took the microphone from his mother's trembling hand. He looked out at the sea of reporters and board members, and with absolute pride, he introduced Lila as his beloved wife, and the little boy as his legally adopted son. He then turned to the giant presentation screen behind him. With a nod to his assistant, the screen lit up with undeniable proof of Eleanor's recent attempts to bribe family court judges and illegally siphon company funds to mount her hostile takeover. Gasps echoed through the opulent room. Stripped of her power and exposed as a corrupt, manipulative fraud, Eleanor watched in horror as the board members turned their backs on her one by one. Security quietly escorted her out of the building, her legacy permanently destroyed. When the chaos subsided, and they were finally alone in the quiet sanctuary of the penthouse, Sebastian turned to Lila. The armor of the untouchable billionaire was completely gone. He took her hands, his voice thick with emotion, and confessed that he had spent his whole life building walls, but she and her beautiful boy were the only ones who ever made it inside. He asked her to tear up the contract, to forget the will and to be his wife not for a year but for a lifetime. Tears of pure joy spilled down Lila's cheeks as she threw her arms around his neck, the heavy burden of her past finally melting away in his embrace. A year later, the sprawling Kane estate was no longer a silent, imposing fortress. It echoed with the bright, infectious laughter of a little boy running across the green lawns. Sebastian sat on the terrace, reading a bedtime story, while Lila rested her head against his shoulder. Her hand gently rested on her noticeably rounded belly, where their new baby was growing. They had walked through the fire of high society lies and corporate greed, leaving it all behind to build a genuine, unbreakable family. If this story touched your heart, share it with someone who needs to hear a good story of love and redemption. Subscribe to the channel to follow the next stories. We will see you next time.